Alright guys, some final thoughts on the velox. There's not much more to do. I hit 700 FPS with this longer barrel. And in the process I discovered a couple interesting things. One is that with the piston disengaged, in other words, not even on the barrel with the shroud removed, the gun cycled 3 different shots. In other words, it cycled the hammer to the rear and fired again with me not assisting with the bolt. So there is some blowback out of the valve into the hammer path that's either a secondary system or the primary system, and then the piston is just the, like assist. I don't really know how that works, but it'll cycle with the piston or with the shroud removed if the pressure is high enough. If you're in that 3500 range, it'll cycle. These I'm debating. I have a design in CAD complete. I have a quote to send it out to a CNC shop. The reason I'd be sending it out is the design requires thread milling, which is a CNC milling machine coming around and doing external threads from above. Anyway, I'm not set up for any of that, especially not with that type of accuracy. But I have a quote and everything set up. So if there's interest in those, there's no way to tell right now because it seems like nobody has a velox. So it's like, I don't know if there's a market for that or not. Nobody has bought the stocks and nobody has bought the off-tank adapters or whatever. So we'll see. If there's an eventual, the design actually brings the tank right up to the bottom of this tank and it brings it back another ½ inch. So it's almost level at the end. It's a little further out than this tank, but they're almost flush. There's less than a millimeter gap. But yes, there's 2 systems cycling the bolt. And this might be incidental. In other words, the hatsan engineers, they just happen to have blow-by at the bolt. So it's assisting or causing it to cycle, or they did it intentionally, but had already designed in the piston. I'm not sure where they were going with this idea. They could have used one or the other. My presumption, and this is based on all my experiments of tinkering with any type of valve that you can name outside of a top hat Air Force. I'm not a big fan of the Air Force stuff, but outside of that I've designed, built every type of valve under the sun, and my thought is, for whatever reason, the initial design of the velox had the piston system and they started having cycling problems, and one of their engineers said, you know what, let's open up the port on the back of the valve about 10,000 where the stem passes through, and that'll act as an assist for when the piston doesn't have the force required to cycle the system. That's just speculation and conjecture. I don't know if any of that actually happened, but it does explain a lot. It wouldn't be like, oh, let's use the back of the piston to fire the hammer, and then instead of just opening up the port to add more pressure if it wasn't working, saying, you know what, let's just design a whole secondary system with a link under this panel that goes to a piston, especially when the piston system was already their design. They've been using that system on a multitude of guns, so it's like, why would they all of a sudden change the design and reincorporate a piston system? It seems like the piston system wasn't as reliable as they wanted it. They opened up the back of the valve where the stem is and allowed some blowback. And that's why I'm getting semi-auto action with this system completely disengaged. But anyway, so what I was saying was, yeah, if there's demand for the drop blocks, this will be back here. It'll be almost flush with the other tank. It gives you 100 cc's as opposed to 50. The stock, it's 3D printed in anodized aluminum. I made those for it. And I broke 700 FPS with the longer barrel, only for 2 shots, but whatever. I'm so tired of messing with the barrels and seals and transfer port alignment. I don't even care anymore. I did it. That's it. It's on video. And what else? I'll probably move on, and I haven't thought of what I'm gonna build next as far as like a scratch build or anything. I really haven't thought about it. I don't know. I wish I had the property. If I had a couple acres, I would just jump right to like a 1-inch big bore, 1 caliber. And, I'd use a straight main tube, like a 2-inch steel tube, total disregard for what the thing's going to weigh and just build a 6-foot long, 1-inch bore. And I'd actually use a Crossman. I was thinking about this the other night. I would use a Crossman gas ram from one of the Springers. They're about, I want to say, I don't know, 75 kilos of force, whatever that is, 170 pounds. And I would use that as the, to drive the hammer. Instead of a hammer spring, just use, a gas ram from a Springer to drive the hammer. And then like a huge side lever with a long stroke, and see how many foot-pounds I could develop. But I wouldn't have anywhere to shoot it or test it or anything, because even if it came out terrible, it'd probably be in the realm of 1,500 or 2,000 foot-pounds, especially with a long, with a 6-foot, 5-foot barrel or whatever. It would just be insane. I mean, the new AEA is pretty impressive, and that's a 95 caliber with somewhat limited air on board. I think they're carrying about 1,000 cc's of 1,400, and they got that 7,000 psi compressor. I don't know how that's all going to work when everything all of a sudden switches over to 7,000. I could see people blowing themselves up, because you're going to have a market flooded, and I know it's been approved for, the DOT in Europe, whatever they're called. They've approved the use of 7,000 psi pressure vessels, but in the U.S. It's not going through. So we're going to have 7,000 psi compressors, but we're not going to have 7,000 psi guns. So that's going to be real interesting. But anyway, back to the gun. I'm assuming that the numbers that they're boasting about, 4,000 foot-pounds or whatever, that's going to be with a 7,000 psi fill, which ironically would be available in Europe, where they're only allowed to have, in most countries, 12 foot-pounds or something. But in the U.S., I'm guessing on a 4,500 psi fill with a 95 caliber and a decent length barrel, I'm sure people are going to be getting, numbers that we've never seen before, like 2,000 plus FPE, way more than a regular shotgun 12 gauge with a slug. It's going to put that to shame. And we're still talking about a pellet gun here. This is something that, you turn 18, you order it online, it shows up at your door. But then again, I guess the same could be said for a 12 gauge. But you can't order that online and have it delivered to your door. So it's still a little bit different. Let's hope nobody gets into, I don't know, street crime with air guns or something. That wouldn't be good. But anyway, as for the velox, it's been fun. I think the gun's awesome. If you use it within its designed range, if you keep the pressure above 2,000, you keep the piston well lubed with the lithium grease. You use lighter pellets. I don't know how heavier pellets would cycle, because that forward bolt snap, it's strong enough to drive the pellet into the barrel, but the longer the pellet, the more drag on the barrel. So, the people that were returning them and having a lot of problems with the semi-automatic fire, going into full burst and stuff, I think those were either early adopter models, like basically protos that were sent out for review, or they were running lower on pressure after 2 mags, didn't take notice. Hey, I've only shot 2 magazines, and now they're trying to shoot it at 1,500 psi, and it's doing little full auto, and it's not fully retracting the bolt, and it's not cycling, it's breaking magazines. There could be all types of problems. And Hatsan could have, I guess they could have solved all that with a regulator or whatever, but it's an Econo model. I mean, picture this. You buy the Velox Viper for, I guess, $1,000 or $1,100. You're not getting much more than this pistol. You get 30 foot-pounds, but then you got to figure what percentage of people are going to be hunting with the semi-automatic pistols. I don't know, but I'm guessing it's a smaller number. But you're going to have the same issues, because off the top of my head, the Viper isn't regulated either. So at lower pressure, you're going to have a lot of the same issues. So for $400, I think this is a pretty good deal. We had a void in the market for about 16 years with semi-automatic 22 or bigger pistols. There was the Crossman 2210, which was a plastic gimmicky. It was kind of, it was, what do you call it, double action, I guess, when you have to pull the trigger and the trigger cycling the mag and the hammer at once. But it was 22 semi-automatic for all intents and purposes. Then there was a void of any semi-automatic pistols up until about 2018 or 19. I always thought it was crazy, and I made that comment on the forums years ago. Because you had the Crossman 600 50 years earlier, and it worked flawlessly, and it was 22 cal, and it was economical. And all of a sudden now there was 2015 comes around. There's no semi-automatic 22 caliber or 25 caliber pistols available. I thought it was nuts. And then AEA rolled out a couple of their models which were way too big to be pistols, and I forget what else. Steyr, they always had a competition pistol with a 5-shot mag that worked flawlessly and was ridiculously accurate. What else was there? There was probably a couple other obscure models in there somewhere. But yeah, there was definitely a lack of diversity in semi-automatic air pistols, outside of action pistols, which they were all 177 and majority BB. And now we have things like the Huben, which I've talked about before, where you can kill a deer pretty much with your semi-automatic BB gun pistol, which is just insane if you think about that historically. But yeah, so anyway, I like the gun. It's been fun tinkering, coming up with designs, and seeing what makes it tick. Anyway, more to come. I'll come up with a new project idea soon, I'm sure.